Emily Harper had always believed that her family was strong, the kind of family people in their small Vermont town admired quietly from a distance. She was 46, kind-hearted, calm, and known for the gentle smile she carried everywhere she went. Her husband Daniel Harper worked long hours as a financial consultant, traveling often between Vermont and nearby cities for meetings, but Emily had never complained. She understood his work supported their comfortable life. Their home stood at the end of a quiet street surrounded by tall maple trees, and every morning Emily woke up early, brewed coffee, and watched the sunlight slowly spread across the backyard. For years her life followed a simple rhythm, taking care of the house, visiting neighbors, reading books, and waiting for Daniel to return from work trips. Their only son, Ryan Harper, had recently graduated from college in Boston and decided to spend a few months at home before starting his career. Emily had been excited about his return. She missed the energy he used to bring into the house when he was younger. When Ryan arrived one warm summer afternoon, carrying bags and laughing as he hugged his parents, the house suddenly felt alive again. Ryan was 23 now, taller than his father and confident in a quiet way. He had Daniel's thoughtful nature but Emily's gentle personality, which made people like him easily. In the first weeks after he returned, everything felt natural. Ryan helped with small repairs around the house, mowed the lawn, and often cooked dinner when Daniel worked late. Emily found comfort in those simple moments. They talked in the kitchen while preparing meals, laughed about old family memories, and sometimes watched movies together in the living room like they had years ago. For Emily, it felt like time had briefly moved backward to happier, simpler days. But slowly she began to notice that Ryan had changed in ways she had not expected. He was no longer the boy who once needed her advice about homework or school problems. He had become a grown man with thoughtful opinions, calm confidence, and a way of observing people carefully before speaking. Sometimes when Emily talked about her day or mentioned small frustrations about life, Ryan listened closely in a way that surprised her. Daniel loved her, she knew that, but he was often distracted by work, emails, and deadlines. Ryan, on the other hand, seemed fully present when she spoke. At first Emily simply appreciated the attention. It felt nice to be heard. One evening in early September, the air outside had started turning cooler, and Emily was in the kitchen preparing pasta for dinner. Daniel had called earlier to say he would be late because of a meeting in New York. Ryan walked in wearing a gray sweater and offered to help cook. They worked side by side, chopping vegetables and stirring sauce while soft music played from Emily's phone on the counter. Their conversation moved easily from topic to topic. Ryan talked about his college friends, Emily shared stories about her childhood in Maine, and soon they were laughing in a relaxed way that felt comfortable. Emily realized she had not laughed like that in a long time. After dinner they sat on the back porch watching the sunset stretch across the sky. The maple leaves were beginning to change color, and the quiet street looked peaceful. Ryan leaned back in his chair and said thoughtfully, "You know, Mom, you've spent your whole life taking care of everyone else." Emily smiled gently. "That's what families do." Ryan shook his head slightly. "Still, people don't always notice how much you give." Emily felt a strange warmth hearing those words. It had been many years since someone had spoken about her sacrifices so openly. She brushed it off with a small laugh, but something about Ryan's tone stayed with her. Over the next few days, similar moments happened again. Ryan often chose to stay home rather than go out with friends. He joined Emily for morning coffee, helped her in the garden, and sometimes walked with her through the neighborhood during quiet evenings. Neighbors even joked that Ryan had become Emily's favorite companion. Emily laughed when she heard those comments, but inside she wondered why Ryan seemed so interested in spending time with her. It was kind and thoughtful, but also unusual. Daniel noticed it too but interpreted it differently. "He just enjoys being home before starting real life," Daniel said casually one night while packing for another work trip. Emily nodded, though she wasn't completely convinced. As the days passed, she began noticing small details that made her slightly uncomfortable. Sometimes when Ryan looked at her during conversations, his expression seemed deeper than simple family affection. It was subtle, nothing inappropriate, yet the intensity in his eyes lingered longer than she expected. Emily tried to ignore it. She reminded herself that Ryan had simply matured and perhaps respected her more now that he was older. Still, a quiet unease started forming in the back of her mind. One evening a gentle rain began falling outside, tapping softly against the windows. Daniel was away on another overnight trip, leaving the house unusually quiet. Emily and Ryan sat in the living room watching an old romantic movie Emily loved when she was younger. The room glowed with soft light from a lamp in the corner, and the sound of rain created a calm atmosphere. Halfway through the movie Emily realized Ryan was not watching the screen. His eyes were on her. She turned slightly, surprised. "What is it?" she asked with a small smile. Ryan hesitated before answering. "Nothing. I was just thinking." Emily felt curious. "About what?" Ryan looked away for a moment as if choosing his words carefully. "About how people don't always see the ones who care for them the most." Emily felt her chest tighten slightly. "Your father cares about me," she replied gently. Ryan nodded but didn't say anything else. The silence between them suddenly felt heavier than before. Emily sensed something had shifted in a way she could not fully explain. She stood up and stretched lightly. "I think I'll make some tea," she said, moving toward the kitchen. Ryan watched her quietly as she walked away. In that moment Emily felt a strange awareness, as if the safe and familiar relationship she had always shared with her son was quietly standing at the edge of something uncertain. Nothing had been said directly, nothing inappropriate had happened, but a feeling had entered the room that she could not ignore anymore. Later that night after Ryan went upstairs, Emily remained in the kitchen holding her warm cup of tea. The rain outside had slowed to a gentle drizzle. She stared through the window at the dark yard, thinking about the evening. A quiet voice inside her whispered that their family life might be changing in ways she never expected. And deep down, Emily felt the beginning of a realization that frightened her. Sometimes the most complicated emotions appear not from strangers, but from the people closest to us, and once those feelings begin to grow, nothing in a family can ever remain exactly the same again. The days after that quiet evening changed the atmosphere inside the Harper house in ways Emily could not ignore. Autumn moved slowly through their small Vermont town, bringing cool air and golden leaves that covered the streets, yet inside the house an unusual tension had begun to grow. Emily tried to continue her routine as if nothing had happened. She woke early, prepared breakfast, watered the plants, and kept herself busy with small chores, but her thoughts often returned to the strange feeling she had noticed in Ryan's eyes that night. Ryan, however, acted almost the same as before. He was still kind, still helpful, and still spent most of his time at home. Yet Emily began to notice that he watched her more carefully now, like someone quietly studying a person they cared deeply about. It was never disrespectful, but it made Emily uneasy because she could not decide if she was imagining things or if something had truly shifted between them. Daniel left for another business trip 2 days later, this time to Chicago, promising he would return before the weekend. Emily waved goodbye with her usual warm smile, but the moment his car disappeared down the road she felt a strange sense of loneliness that she had never noticed so strongly before. Ryan seemed to sense that feeling immediately. That afternoon he suggested they go for a walk near the lake just outside town, a place Emily had always loved. The sky was clear and the air smelled fresh with the scent of autumn leaves. As they walked along the quiet path beside the water, Ryan talked about his future plans, possible jobs in different cities, and the uncertainty he felt about leaving home. Emily listened carefully, offering advice the way a mother always does, but she also noticed that Ryan often turned the conversation toward her life instead of his own. He asked about her dreams when she was younger, about the things she had once wanted to do before marriage and family responsibilities filled her days. Emily laughed softly at the questions because no one had asked her things like that in years. She told him how she once dreamed of traveling across Canada, painting landscapes, and learning photography. Ryan listened with real interest, his eyes bright with curiosity. "You could still do those things," he said suddenly. Emily shook her head with a gentle smile. "Life doesn't always work that way." Ryan looked at her with quiet seriousness. "Maybe it should." His words stayed with Emily long after they returned home. That evening they cooked dinner together again while music played softly in the background. The conversation flowed naturally, yet there was an emotional closeness growing between them that Emily began to recognize more clearly. Ryan seemed to understand her moods without explanation. When she felt tired, he noticed. When she joked about small things, he laughed easily. It was the kind of attention Emily had not felt in years, and although she tried to ignore it, a part of her heart responded to the warmth. Days continued passing in a similar way. Ryan often joined her for coffee in the morning, sometimes sitting quietly at the table while sunlight filled the kitchen. They talked about books, movies, and life experiences. Emily realized that talking with Ryan had become the most comfortable part of her day. But at the same time, the closeness made her nervous. She reminded herself again and again that Ryan was her son, and any emotional confusion had to be stopped before it grew into something more complicated. One evening a cold rainstorm arrived suddenly, covering the town in wind and heavy clouds. The lights flickered for a moment, and Emily lit a few candles in the living room to make the house feel warmer. Daniel called to say his meeting had been extended and he would stay another night in Chicago. Emily tried to hide her disappointment, but Ryan noticed immediately. "You miss him," Ryan said quietly while they sat across from each other on the couch. Emily nodded. "Of course. We've been married a long time." Ryan looked thoughtful. The candlelight reflected softly across the room, creating a calm but emotional atmosphere. They started watching a movie together, yet Emily sensed that Ryan was distracted. After a while he turned the television volume down and spoke in a voice that sounded more serious than usual. "Can I ask you something?" Emily looked at him. "Of course." Ryan hesitated for a few seconds before continuing. "Have you ever felt like people forget who you really are?" The question surprised her. Emily thought carefully before answering. "Sometimes, maybe. Life becomes busy. People focus on responsibilities." Ryan nodded slowly. "That's what I see happening to you." Emily felt a small wave of discomfort. "What do you mean?" Ryan leaned forward slightly. "You take care of everyone. Dad's work, the house, everything. But no one asks what you need." Emily tried to smile lightly. "Your father cares about me. He just works hard." Ryan didn't argue, but his expression remained serious. "I just think you deserve more than feeling invisible." The sincerity in his voice made Emily's heart beat faster. She could hear the rain outside growing stronger against the windows. Something about the moment felt dangerously emotional. "Ryan," she said gently, "you shouldn't worry about things like that." But Ryan didn't look away. For a moment he seemed to struggle with words he wasn't sure he should say. Then he finally spoke again, quietly but clearly. "I notice you." Emily felt the room grow very still. She understood instantly that the conversation had crossed into territory she had been afraid of. Ryan's feelings were no longer simply admiration or respect. There was something deeper in his voice, something that should never exist between them. Emily stood up slowly, trying to remain calm. "It's late," she said softly. "We should both get some rest." Ryan realized what had happened and looked down, clearly embarrassed by his own honesty. "I'm sorry," he said quickly. "I didn't mean to make things strange." Emily paused before answering. Her heart felt heavy because she could see the confusion in his expression. Ryan was not trying to cause harm, he was simply young and caught in emotions he didn't fully understand. "We'll talk tomorrow," she said gently. Then she walked upstairs to her bedroom, closing the door behind her. That night Emily lay awake staring at the ceiling while the rain slowly faded outside. Her thoughts moved in circles. She realized that the attention Ryan had been giving her had slowly created an emotional closeness that now felt dangerous. She knew she had to protect their family before feelings became stronger or more complicated. Yet another thought troubled her deeply. Part of her heart had enjoyed the attention more than she wanted to admit. That realization frightened her even more than Ryan's words. As the house fell silent in the middle of the night, Emily understood something clearly for the first time. The boundary between them had begun to blur, and unless she acted carefully and quickly, the quiet storm growing inside their home could change their family forever. The morning after the storm felt strangely quiet inside the Harper house, as if both Emily and Ryan understood that something important had happened but neither knew how to face it directly. Emily woke early, earlier than usual, hoping the calm routine of making coffee and opening the kitchen windows would clear her mind. The sky outside looked pale and cold after the night of rain, and fallen leaves covered the backyard like a golden carpet. She moved slowly through the kitchen, trying to focus on normal tasks, yet her thoughts kept returning to Ryan's words from the night before. She knew he had spoken honestly, and that honesty made the situation more serious, not less. When Ryan finally came downstairs, the air between them felt different. He greeted her politely, but his voice carried a quiet hesitation that had never existed before. They sat at the table with their coffee cups, and for a few minutes neither of them spoke much. Emily realized that avoiding the situation would only allow the confusion to grow, yet she also wanted to choose her words carefully so she would not hurt Ryan's feelings. Ryan looked tired, as if he had also spent the night thinking. After a long silence he finally said softly that he was sorry for what he had said, explaining that he had not planned to speak that way but the words had simply come out. Emily listened calmly, appreciating that he was taking responsibility, yet she could also see the emotion in his eyes that told her his feelings had not disappeared overnight. She answered gently that sometimes people develop complicated emotions when they spend too much time together during lonely periods of life, and that it did not mean those feelings were right or should be followed. Ryan nodded slowly, clearly understanding what she meant. He admitted that after coming home from college he had begun seeing his mother not just as the person who raised him but also as a strong, kind woman who had sacrificed many things for the family, and that admiration had slowly grown into feelings he did not expect. Emily felt sadness hearing that confession, because she could see how sincere he was. She explained that admiration and care were natural but certain boundaries must always remain strong in a family, because crossing them could damage the trust that holds everything together. Ryan agreed quietly, and the conversation ended with an uneasy peace between them. Later that day Daniel returned from Chicago, bringing his usual energy into the house, talking about meetings and business ideas as he unpacked his suitcase. Emily smiled and listened, but she noticed Ryan remained quieter than usual during dinner. Daniel assumed his son was simply thinking about job opportunities and starting adult life. In reality, Ryan was still processing the emotional conversation he had shared with his mother that morning. Over the next few days, Emily made small but careful changes to restore healthy distance. She spent more time visiting neighbors, attending a local book club, and encouraging Ryan to reconnect with friends in town. Ryan seemed to understand the reason behind those changes, and he respected them without complaint. Still, moments of tension appeared unexpectedly. One evening, Emily was folding laundry in the living room while Daniel answered emails in his home office. Ryan walked through the room and paused for a moment, watching his mother quietly. Their eyes met briefly, and both quickly looked away, aware of the complicated feelings they were trying to move past. Emily realized that rebuilding normal family boundaries would take patience and time. A few nights later, another quiet moment forced them to confront the situation more directly. Emily went downstairs late at night to get a glass of water and found Ryan sitting alone at the kitchen table with a notebook. He looked up, surprised but calm. Instead of leaving, Emily decided to sit down across from him. The house was silent except for the ticking clock on the wall. Ryan closed his notebook and said he had been thinking about everything that had happened. He explained that he understood now how dangerous those feelings could become if he stayed in the same environment too long. Emily listened carefully, feeling both relief and concern. Ryan continued by saying he believed the best solution would be for him to move forward with his own life sooner than planned. He had been researching jobs in larger cities where he could build his career and meet new people. Emily felt a quiet sense of hope hearing those words. She told him she supported that decision and believed new experiences would help him focus on his future instead of confusing emotions. Ryan smiled slightly and admitted that leaving home might be difficult but also necessary. For the first time since the stormy night conversation, the tension between them began to ease. They talked calmly about practical things like job interviews, apartments, and possible cities where Ryan might start working. During the conversation, Emily gently reminded him that he was a good person who simply needed time to grow and understand his emotions better. Ryan thanked her sincerely and said he appreciated her honesty instead of anger or judgment. That moment strengthened their relationship in a healthier way, turning the emotional confusion into a lesson rather than a secret. Over the next weeks, Ryan focused seriously on job applications, spending hours preparing resumes and attending online interviews. Emily supported him quietly while also continuing to rebuild closeness with Daniel, who had started spending more evenings at home after noticing how much he missed family time during constant business travel. One afternoon, Ryan received a call that would finally change everything. A marketing company in Chicago offered him an entry-level position with strong future opportunities. When he shared the news at dinner, Daniel reacted with excitement and pride, immediately congratulating his son. Emily smiled warmly as well, though her heart carried mixed emotions. She knew this opportunity would create the distance needed to fully heal the complicated situation that had almost damaged their family. Later that night, Ryan spoke privately with his mother, telling her he believed the move would help him grow into the person he wanted to become. Emily agreed and encouraged him to embrace the chance with confidence. In that moment, both of them understood that the difficult weeks had taught them something valuable about honesty, boundaries, and the importance of protecting family relationships before emotions go too far. As winter slowly approached and Ryan prepared for his move to Chicago, the Harper home began to feel calmer again. The storm of confusion had not destroyed their family, but it had forced them to face truths they could no longer ignore. And although the future would bring new changes, Emily knew one thing clearly: sometimes the hardest moments in life appear not to break a family apart, but to guide its members back toward the right path before everything is lost. Winter arrived early in Vermont that year, covering the Harper neighborhood with soft snow and quiet mornings, and inside the Harper house life slowly began to shift toward a calmer direction after the difficult weeks that had almost changed everything. Ryan focused completely on preparing for his new job in Chicago, spending his days organizing documents, researching apartments, and planning the next chapter of his life, while Emily watched with a mixture of pride and relief because she knew the distance would help both of them heal and return their relationship to something healthy and natural again. Daniel, who had always been busy with work, also started noticing how important family time truly was, and after Ryan shared the news about the job offer, Daniel made a quiet decision to reduce some of his travel so he could spend more time at home. The house that once felt tense now carried a calmer rhythm as each person slowly adjusted to the coming change. During the final week before Ryan's move, the family shared many simple moments together: warm dinners, short walks through the snowy streets, and long conversations about the future. Emily could see how much Ryan had matured during the past month. The confusion that once appeared in his eyes had been replaced by determination and responsibility. One evening they all sat in the living room with a fire burning softly in the fireplace while snow fell outside the windows. Daniel talked excitedly about Chicago, remembering his own younger years when he had first traveled for work, and Ryan listened carefully, asking questions about living in a big city. Emily watched the conversation quietly, feeling grateful that their family had found a way to move forward instead of falling apart. Later that night, after Daniel went upstairs to sleep, Ryan remained in the living room for a moment and asked Emily if they could talk privately before he left for Chicago. Emily nodded and sat down across from him, knowing this conversation would be important for both of them. Ryan spoke honestly, saying that the weeks at home had taught him more about emotions and responsibility than any college class ever had. He admitted that he had been confused about his feelings earlier but now understood that admiration and loneliness can sometimes create emotions that feel stronger than they should. Emily listened with compassion and explained that life often brings complicated moments, but what truly matters is the courage to recognize the truth and choose the right path. Ryan thanked her for handling the situation with patience instead of anger, saying that her calm guidance had helped him realize how important it was to protect their family bond. Emily smiled gently and told him she would always support him as long as he continued making wise choices. The conversation ended with a quiet understanding between them, a moment that felt like closing the door on a difficult chapter while opening another filled with hope. The next morning arrived quickly, and Ryan packed the final suitcase into his car while the cold winter sun rose slowly over the neighborhood. Daniel hugged his son proudly, reminding him that hard work and honesty would take him far in life. When Ryan turned to Emily, the moment felt emotional but peaceful. He hugged her warmly, the way a son hugs his mother before leaving home to start his own journey. Emily felt tears in her eyes but also a deep sense of relief because the boundary that once seemed uncertain had been restored with respect and maturity. Ryan promised to call often and visit during holidays, then started the car and drove down the snowy street toward the highway that would lead him to Chicago and a new life. Emily stood on the porch watching the car disappear until it became a small dot in the distance. Daniel placed a comforting hand on her shoulder and asked softly if she was okay. Emily nodded and smiled because she knew this change was necessary and healthy for everyone. In the weeks that followed, the Harper house felt quieter but also lighter, as if the tension that once filled the rooms had finally disappeared. Ryan called regularly to share stories about his new job, his small apartment in the city, and the exciting but challenging experience of building an independent life. Each call sounded happier than the last, and Emily could hear confidence growing in his voice. Meanwhile, Emily also began making changes in her own life. Remembering the dreams she had mentioned during those long conversations with Ryan, she finally joined a small painting class at the local community center. The class brought new friends and a creative energy that made her feel younger and more alive. Daniel noticed the change immediately and supported her by spending more weekends at home instead of traveling for extra work. Their marriage slowly regained warmth because they began talking more openly about their lives, something they had not done in years. Sometimes difficult experiences force people to look honestly at the parts of life they have been ignoring. For the Harper family, the emotional confusion that once threatened their peace had instead become a turning point that helped each person grow. Ryan learned the importance of understanding emotions before acting on them. Emily rediscovered her own identity beyond the role of mother and wife. Daniel realized that success at work means little if it takes away time from the people who matter most. Nearly a year later, Ryan returned home for the holidays, walking through the same front door with a confident smile and stories about his new friends and career progress. The family gathered around the dinner table, laughing and sharing memories, and Emily felt proud watching the man her son had become. The past no longer felt heavy because they had faced it honestly and moved forward together. As snow fell softly outside that evening and the house filled with warm light and conversation, Emily realized something important about life and family. Even when emotions lead people close to the wrong path, understanding and compassion can guide them back before lasting damage is done. The Harper family had come dangerously close to losing their balance, but by choosing honesty, distance, and respect, they protected the love that truly mattered, proving that sometimes the strongest families are not the ones without problems but the ones brave enough to face those problems and rebuild together.